Welcome to another episode of Gray Matter. I'm Michael Krasny. This is Gray Matter with Michael Krasny, your humble and generally affable host. And in this episode of Gray Matter, we meet Sarah Hill, former interactive TV journalist and award-winning TV reporter who has been awarded 12 Mid-American Emmys. Sarah spent decades covering trauma in Sri Lanka, Guatemala, Indonesia, Gambia, and Congo, and she also had coverage of numerous issues related to veterans in her career in media, and that was in fact her beat. In 2015, she became involved in Honor Everywhere, a project using virtual and augmented reality for veterans, which featured virtual visits to World War II, Vietnam, Korea, and women's memorials. This led her to biometric measuring and neurofeedback, and her present role as CEO of Healium, that's Healium, Heal. It's an enterprise dedicated via biometrics and virtual and augmented reality to unlocking healing powers within the human body through training inside of virtual worlds with the body's electricity via wearables. She holds 5 patents and the title of chief storyteller, which we'll find more about. And she has also said she has 3 children, and I'm quoting her here, including my husband. Welcome to Gray Matter, Sarah. Good to have you with us.
Michael, it's so great to see you and hear you and to share a little bit about our nerdery. So appreciate the opportunity.
Well, and I appreciate your being here. There's so much to talk about with you, but let's begin with the veterans beat, because that sort of led you into biometrics. It led you, unfortunately, to some extent into some trauma, covering all these traumas on your own. I mean, you were experiencing panic attacks, compassion fatigue, and this is important in your story. Tell us why.
As you interview a lot of people, and the ability to tell a good story sometimes depends on the ability to step inside their story and empathize with their situation. And so I was a television news reporter for decades, covered the aftermath of the tsunami in Sri Lanka and Indonesia, children who were starving in Guatemala. And as you and your audience may know, in order to be a good storyteller or a journalist, sometimes you have to do some things that are difficult, knock on doors of people who've lost children, and you're covering sometimes the worst day of someone's life. And you're doing it all over and over and over and over again. And that toll ultimately took a toll on my mental health. I developed an inability to sleep, insomnia, that eventually, when you're not sleeping, your body isn't resetting. And my body and my mind revolted in the form of panic attacks. And so, developed Healium for me, as well as the millions of people who struggle with anxiety. And you are correct in that it started with veterans doing virtual tours for them.
And we go from there really to working with, and a lot of these veterans were older and terminally ill, so they couldn't actually go there in terms of being there. So they went through virtual reality, and we can explore that somewhat. Although in those days we were talking about Google Glass, weren't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was a glass hole back in the day, as they say. And that was ultimately what got me into immersive media. We were using glass to provide virtual tours of the World War II Memorial for terminally ill and aging World War II veterans who weren't able to physically travel there. Some of your audience might be familiar with the honor flights that fly veterans on real physical flights to Washington, D.C. to see their memorials, because sadly the memorial, was built too late for a lot of these 80, 90, 100-year-olds. And so, the Honor Flight Network is a great free program for veterans that allows them to see it. But what we were finding through that program, and we formed, myself along with a lot of other great volunteers, formed the hub in Columbia, Missouri, was that a lot of these veterans would call me, leave very passionate voicemails that they would love to go, but they're on too much oxygen, or their body, they were worried their bodies wouldn't physically make the trip, and their doctors advised them against physically going. So as a technologist, was trying to understand, what do I have in my skill set that could allow them to see the World War II, Vietnam, Korea Women's Memorial without actually going there. And that was through glass. And ultimately, when Google pulled the glass program, we needed an alternative. And that alternative was virtual reality. And so we started gathering up old headsets from any entity that was willing to provide them to us. And we would ship them out all over the nation. And we flew all around the nation to different veterans' homes to allow them inside the goggles to see the World War II, Vietnam, Korea Women's Memorial. And now, in the aftermath of the pandemic, where a lot of the honor flights were grounded, Honor Everywhere is still a free tool that allows them to see their memorials. And through that process, we noticed that VR and all immersive media was impacting these veterans' physiology. They weren't just watching these experiences, they were feeling them. And so we started doing brain maps.
These are EEGs, basically, right? As opposed to EKGs, yeah.
Right, EEG, electroencephalogram. And these are full 24 sensor EEG caps with gel that would go over the head. Because as a journalist, a naturally curious person, I was wondering, what is happening to these individuals? Because after these experiences, they would take off the goggles. They would take deep cleansing breaths. They would, they would sigh and they would say, I like how I felt. Can I watch that again? And it was almost as if you had put them in a warm bath and, their body just softened. And so wanting to better understand what is this media doing to their physiology, I teamed up, who is now my co-founder now, Dr. Jeff Tarrant, and he started doing a series of brain scans before and after these experiences to see how is it impacting the physiology.
Excuse me, Sarah, you were doing heart rates too, though, weren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Heart rate and EEG to better discover how is the media impacting physiology. And through that process, we learned that you can create experiences in certain ways that have different impacts on your brain pattern and heart rate. And ultimately, that led us on a path to integrate biometric data with immersive media to allow these users to learn to self-regulate their brain patterns and heart rate.
It's exciting new frontiers. It's brave new world. And I think there's much to explore here with you. And I know people will have questions for you as well. But let me kind of cut to a certain chase here, because I can remember putting on those goggles and headphones and so forth, the Oculus experience. And, you're there. I mean, you are immersed. It's strong enough sometimes just watching television and having the news affect you that way. It can be, get your blood pressure way up and have all kinds of deleterious effects on you, particularly because the news is so often down. But this is kind of looking at how it downshifts your nervous system, literally, which is kind of fascinating about it. I mean, you're talking about seeing inside your body and seeing the kind of performance that your body is doing in response to these kinds of stimuli. And the technology is changing all the time too, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, we have a media diet. As a journalist for decades, I felt in my own body how a poor media diet had impacted my physiology. And the things that we watch on the news and in our social media feed absolutely impact our brain patterns and our heart rate. And not to say that media is bad in any way. We need that media, good or bad, to know who to vote for, who to vote against. Is there a tornado coming in my area? Am I safe? Where should I send my kids to school? But if you don't counter that negative media fiber with some positive fiber, then you're off balance. And that poor digital nutrition will absolutely make you sick. And so, that's all we're doing with Healium, is using media as a tool to positively impact physiology in a way that allows people to unlock the healing powers they have inside themselves.
And this is really mind-body. This is a very organic vision of how our minds and bodies are locked together, and it certainly is complemented by a great deal of research. I wonder, though, the research goes into biofeedback and meditation and all of these kinds of things that have been proven to move us forward in ways that can be healing. Thus your name Healium for your company, with HEAL. There's also a lot of skepticism, though, about the efficacy. I'd like you to address that before we go and explore it even more. I mean, when I mention some of these things to friends of mine who are hardcore scientists, they say, where's the science in this? And, there are studies of transcendental meditation, all kinds of things that are pretty revealing in terms of efficacy. But there's all that skepticism, too, because some of the science, I suppose, seems to hardcore scientists to be a little squishy, or I'm not sure what, they don't see double-blind kinds of studies or whatever. You've got a lot of research, and you've got even your own patents to back you up. Talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So 5 peer-reviewed journals, Frontiers in Psychology, Journal of Neuroregulation, the Scholarly Journal of Behavioral Science and Psychology, Frontiers in Virtual Reality Medicine. I mean, it's well documented that virtual reality impacts brain patterns and heart rate. In fact, it's been found to be just as effective overall. The VR industry has been found to be just as effective as a dose of hydromorphorone or Dilaudid, which is a powerful painkiller. And so that's why you're seeing the rise of these virtual reality digital therapeutics. You can see on a brain map in real time how immersive media impacts the brain when you're inside the goggles. So the brain ultimately believes what it sees, just as you would take a warm bath or a walk in the park. If we are putting a park inside the headset, your body is responding as if it is in a park. And from a science perspective, that is well documented. Virtual reality does absolutely impact brain patterns and heart rate.
But what about the healing power? I guess that's where there's some skepticism still, particularly about the healing power. I mean, we're in a mental health crisis. If we could use virtual reality we got hundreds of millions of people who have terrible anxiety. There's extraordinary power possibilities here. And I'm not just talking about something like a power bar. We're talking about a whole continuum of what can ameliorate the kinds of problems we're facing. Talk about the evidence there. I mean, where you find the proof there for healing power.
This is the Stress Olympics. It's a mental health emergency, and not everybody is trained for it. And so not only elite athletes, but worker athletes are trying to seek out drugless, non-harmful coping mechanisms that can allow them to be more self-aware of their brain patterns and heart rate. So with Healium, it's not a replacement for psychotropic medication. It's not a replacement for professional counseling, which is one of the best things that we can do for ourselves. It's a fitness tool. Much as you would exercise your body, this is virtual peace for the mind. Think of it like a waterfall that you would listen to before you go to bed. Well, Healium in that same way is media that you immerse yourself to quickly downshift the nervous system. So, want to be careful and, draw that distinction is, this is not a replacement for psychotropic medication. It's a self-awareness tool as part of your regular media diet that you can add some positive fiber in there.
You're kind of training your brain, right? You're training your brain?
Becoming more self-aware of what your brain patterns and your heart rate have the ability to do. So for instance, when you're inside these experiences, you see your EEG or heart rate live streamed as a firefly that goes up and down. You learn very quickly that when you breathe more, that firefly will go up. And as you breathe more, that heart rate goes down. And that area of self-regulation and self-awareness is something that I didn't learn till I was in my 40s. It's certainly not something that is taught in schools, but yet it's so very core to the ability to learn to self-regulate your stress. And, after all, in these days of a shortage of mental health therapists, and which are so greatly needed right now, we all need to be cultivating those healing powers that we have inside ourselves. The ability to learn to self-regulate brain patterns and heart rate has power, not only in the virtual world, inside the goggles, but in the real world as well.
Well, let's talk about the distinction of those two, or the dichotomy. I mean, you can do this in your living room. I think you have talked about how important it would be for everybody to have this on their own mobile devices. It's something you could just do in the what I'll call the quotidian aspects of life, daily ritual, or whatever you want to call it. But when you're in there, I mean, it's like being in virtual reality. You can be in a bucolic, terribly serene, wonderful, nurturing place, and then you have to step outside of it. What about the connection between, going through that and experiencing it? Because I could see where it could become something you want to be in all the time, as opposed to being outside in the real world, or the reality that we think of as the real world.
Absolutely. And there's a great documentary called The Social Dilemma that dives a little bit
Terrific
into
documentary. Yeah.
And that's, one of the things at Healium that we are very cognizant of is that there is no replacement for the beauty of the real world. But sadly, in our day and age, whether it be the lack of mobility, or stuck in a submarine or an aircraft carrier, not everyone has the ability to get out and experience nature and nature bathing, if you will. This is virtual nature. That is, not meant to replace reality, but for those times when either you're having a bad day or you just need something that is a drugless, non-harmful coping mechanism to, get you through whatever it is that you're facing. That's something that you can do in a non-invasive way. And I should say, with these wearables, there are 250 million wearables out there in the market, whether it be an Apple Watch, a Fitbit, an Aura Ring, a Whoop band, or any EEG meditation headband. We're hardware agnostic. So, with all of that data, that's some powerful information, not only as a number on your wrist, but when you're setting that singular number out spatially into an environment, and you can learn how to make it rise and fall. That's very powerful, and something that a traditional meditation certainly has value, but is a different flavor of meditation that's called neuromeditation.
No more dashboards for data?
Dashboards for data.
You used to have them, I know, didn't you?
Yeah, dashboards for data are still important. And matter of fact, we still have them for our product, even though our data is displayed as a solar system, or as a flower, or as butterflies that are hatching out of an augmented reality chrysalis. We pair that with a data dashboard that the user still has the ability to see their section length. They also get a Healium score, which allows them to track their progress of focus calm over time. So I think, we'll always probably still have flat data dashboards, but it becomes a very interesting tool when you're able to pair that with an immersive media experience that allows you to step inside your own data story.
And you're seeing this in near real time, I presume, and you can do any wearable.
Right now, you can do two compatible wearables, an Apple Watch and a BrainLink Lite EEG headband. We're adding new wearables all the time because ultimately we want any wearable to have the ability to power Healium as a self-awareness tool.
This is fascinating stuff, because you're really using the body's electricity and the body's own healing powers. I mean, it goes back to almost a lot of the lessons we learned from native people, and what we can do with our own bodies. Or you think about those Tibetan monks who warm their body up just by sitting there and using their mind to do it. Their robes suddenly become much warmer things to be inside of. Lots of questions and lots of responses. Let's try to get to some of them. The first one comes from Kansas City. It's from Sue, and Sue wants to know, which improvements in VR do you think would make the most difference for patients? She says frame rate, resolution, audio.
Mm-hmm.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, all of those are good things. And Healium isn't meant to be used for patients. It's meant to be used for employees. So outside of that patient population, but certainly for patients, there's a huge need. We were just in a call with a children's hospital yesterday for virtual reality goggles for small heads, right? Because all of these goggles were designed by people who did not have small heads. And so, there is value in using virtual reality in some younger populations. The way we use it is ages 13 and above for that reason. But certainly that would be important. Also, being better able to integrate these wearable integrations. We use our technology to do it. That makes it easier. But someday in the future, all virtual reality headsets, hopefully, and they're starting to, will become integrated with EEG sensors, heart rate sensors that allow it to be easier for immersive storytellers and content creators to integrate the body's electricity into their stories, so that you're not just watching these experiences, you're actually feeling them, and they're responding to your own biometric data by how you experience the story. Frame rate is certainly important, and also that the technology companies that are creating these goggles, Meta, Pico, also known as TikTok. TikTok owns Pico.
And China owns TikTok. I'm sorry.
And Vive as well. These headsets are iterating at a very incredibly fast rate, almost too fast for the companies to be able to keep up with these headsets. So in that, there's a new headset that comes out every 6 months, and the public, it still has Oculus Go's when the public is still using Oculus Go's, but yet these companies have sunsetted support for that hardware. And while I applaud the use and the innovation in moving these products forward, it would be great if they wouldn't sunset the devices until they've actually fallen out of or begun to fall out of the public hands. And there's also an incredible learning curve with virtual reality and augmented reality in some respects. But these are, new devices. Just as we had to learn how to use our Blackberries and our mobile devices, it's the same thing with virtual reality and virtual reality goggles. And we do a lot of what's called VR kindergarten, bringing the masses in, educating them about how the headsets work, how you can consume content in the headsets, and how you can navigate the menus. But the world is no longer flat. It's becoming a place that we step into, and that's all we're doing is allowing people not just to view a story from the filter of a fixed rectangle, but actually be inside it in a way that has an impact on their brain patterns and heart rate.
So I was just going to ID. We're talking to Sarah Hill on Gray Matter with Michael Krasny, and she is CEO of Healium. What about getting the goggles and getting the equipment? There's this great digital divide to those who need it, who are impoverished or living many of the countries, for example, that you visited as a reporter and saw all that poverty firsthand. It'd be nice to. I know there's a doctor. His last name is Gordon, whom you may know, who's gone into a lot of war-torn places and tried to work with imaging and tried to work with meditation and the kinds of things that we've been sort of talking about here on the outskirts of this conversation. But any thoughts about that? How we can be of help to those who particularly can't afford these kinds of goggles and technical devices?
Yeah, absolutely. And that some content creators, including ourselves, are trying to reduce that barrier to entry. So, for instance, with our veterans programs, we collect old virtual reality goggles and ship them around to VA centers and nursing homes so that they can access the content. But beyond that, there are ways that we are reducing that line between virtual reality and augmented reality. Ultimately, we know that XR will be very seamless in that you can tap your goggles and either choose to consume an experience virtually 360 or tap it and you can see a pass-through camera where you're seeing the 3D assets superimposed on the screen. We also know that, with whatever these technologies are coming out with the future of mobile devices, that, that line between augmented and virtual reality will ultimately be blurred. And so we reduce the barrier to entry that you don't need goggles by opening up portals on your phone. So in our augmented reality app, you are able to open up a magic portal. It displays just on your mobile device, and then you're able to walk through that portal. Or if you don't have mobility, you can teleport through that portal, and then you're inside another immersive landscape. And if you move your phone side to side, kind of like magic window mode with 360 video in the olden days of Google Cardboard, you're able to be inside some of those immersive landscapes. So my hope is ultimately that technology will allow it so you don't have to have a $200, now $300 standalone headset in order to consume the experiences. And we're seeing that in enterprise. A lot of enterprises right now are using virtual reality goggles for training. Schools have them to be able to step inside the chemistry experiences. And my hope is that will also trickle up to those individuals who lack access to immersive media, but they do have a phone, and they can still consume immersive media on their phone.
You were talking about people who have inability to walk, and looking at a question here from Hershid in Central Florida, who's fascinated that you actually were in Zambia because he comes from Zambia. And when you talked about not being able to walk, it reminded me of what you covered in Zambia. You want to talk about that for a moment? Because Hershid's interested, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Hershid. Good to listen to you in Central Florida. Hello from Columbia, Missouri. We were in Zambia to cover some stories about a group of individuals who lacked access to wheelchairs and traditional mobility. And surprisingly, some of these individuals were crawling on the ground on all fours because they didn't have access to wheelchairs, and traditional wheelchairs were not able to navigate the terrain in Zambia. So that's why we were there. Beautiful people that welcomed us with open arms. Matter of fact, I could still hear some of the women's songs in my head. And we were there for a couple weeks shooting immersive media stories that allowed people to step inside the stories of some of these individuals and experience, what they see.
Another question for you, Sarah, from one of your fellow Missourians. Wants to know, what can we do without a headset to help to focus our attention and clear our minds to improve self-regulation?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you need not just one digiceutical in your medicine cabinet. And when I say digiceutical, I mean digital drug, a drugless, non-harmful coping mechanism. You don't need just Healium, you need a bunch of them. So, seek out all kinds of meditation apps, interventions, try them all and see what works for you, because it's definitely not one size fits all. But you can start very simply with something that doesn't require an app, which is quieting your mind and focusing on your breathing, and then quickly noticing how that impacts your physiology. And that was something with traditional meditation that I struggled with. When I closed my eyes and they said, imagine a beautiful stream, I saw nothing. And I really struggled with that visual aspect. And I always struggled with, am I doing this right? And so, that's one of the reasons why, we developed this technology, is to allow you to have a barometer to know, what's in becoming more self-aware of those brain patterns and those heart rates, so that you can learn to self-regulate. Because ultimately, imagine if it was a weight that you were lifting with your arm, but yet you were never able to see your arm to know, is it going up? And that's just what we're trying to do, to try to add gravity to traditional meditation that allows you to experience it in a more visual way. And that might not be for everyone. Some individuals really excel with close your eyes and meditate. And if that works for you, do that. But you really need to be trying a variety of tools. And there are new ones that come out all the time to see what works for you.
Now, I'm interviewing you, and we have lots of questions, but I have to tell a quick story, because a number of years ago, I had a phobia that came on me completely unwelcome and unheralded, and It was about driving over a certain bridge. And I don't know why it came, but I went to see a behaviorist about it, a psychologist who was behaviorist psychology. And he hooked me up to one of these galvanic pressure machines and said, just imagine yourself driving over it. And he said, you are experiencing something here similar to somebody who would be in a jungle in a loincloth at night. I mean, I'm not saying my imaginative powers are great or anything. I'm just telling you what happened to me and how I was able to conjure this. But it talks about the power of the mind, and what all of this virtual reality allows is for that mind to move in different directions like you're talking about, that really can indeed make a difference in our lives, an extraordinary potential difference in our lives. Talk a little bit, if you will, I will go to more questions, but maybe some people would like clarity, differences between virtual and augmented realities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. I'd be happy to spell that out. And, as you mentioned, that fight or flight response is real inside, virtual reality, or even the bridge. So that's, exactly what we're trying to do is flip that on its head with the media so that it's not triggering fight or flight. It's actually triggering a relaxation response. And the difference between virtual, augmented, and mixed reality is on a spectrum. We have traditional flat 2D media, which certainly still has value. Beyond that is augmented reality. Augmented reality, and different shops define it as different ways. So I'll define it how we refer to it in our shop, is kind of like Pokemon Go, if you've ever played that game. It's a 3D assets that is augmenting and superimposed over your real world. So you see your real living room through the filter of your mobile device, but then you're seeing a 3D asset superimposed on top of your coffee table or on top of your couch. So that's what's called augmented reality. A virtual reality is inside the goggles. So inside a pair of ski goggles that have lenses that you put on your head, that you're in a bubble of video. So when you turn your head to the left, it's not as if the screen orients, it's just that you're in that bubble of video, and you're able to, it makes you feel like when you turn your head, you've turned your head inside the experience. And so that's virtual reality. It's a completely closed off environment. For the most part, they're developing goggles now that when you tap the side of the goggles, it turns into augmented reality. And that's why I was saying that line between AR and VR is blurring, because of those technological advances. So virtual reality is completely inside the goggles. And then to further confuse everyone, there's something called mixed reality. And mixed reality is when you have the ability to interact with those augmented reality assets. So if you break it down, Healium is a flavor of mixed reality, because you're interacting with those assets, not with your hands, but with your heart rate and your brain patterns. But we call it augmented reality because people are more familiar with that term, and it's easier for them to understand. And virtual or wearables are optional with Healium. If you don't want to use a wearable, you just want to view these picturesque landscapes, you can certainly use it that way. But that line between augmented, mixed, and virtual reality is blurring and being redefined every single day. And really, it's confusing to the consumers, because there are such different flavors of media. Ultimately, we know that, for instance, during the days when still photos moved from still to moving pictures, there was a delineation there that, there was, any video that included a still photo, it was two separate pieces of media. But now when you have a video that has a still photo in it, it's all just video. And ultimately, it'll be the same way with immersive media. It's just media, whether it's 2D, whether it is immersive, whether it's augmented, or whether it's interactive with mixed reality. And I'm really excited about the hardware-less solutions that hopefully will come out in the future, that will not require us to, strap that equivalent of a brick cell phone to your face and view these experiences. We know that we are, just in the first phase of these hardware devices. So, the future is bright, but it starts with trying to properly educate people about the different flavors of AR, VR, and MR.
Which you are helping us do, and we're grateful for that. And we're going to go to more of our listeners. I should mention a line of E. E. Cummings, a famous American poet, going through my head. There's a hell of a reality next door. Let's go. I probably should have used that to conclude here, but I'll just go back to give you what happened with that behaviorist psychologist in case anybody was curious about it. I learned meditation techniques. I learned relaxation techniques, and that was the way to the promised land in terms of what was afflicting me. But let's hear from some others. This is from all the way in Cape Town, South Africa.
Wow.
A listener wants to know, this VR-based experience with vets appears to have had a positive therapeutic effect. Has there been any interest from other regions of the world on your work, as many regions are going through much conflict?
Yes. And hello, Cape Town. It's great that you tuned in today, and it's an excellent question. Yes, Healium is used all over the world, in Germany, in Africa, in New Zealand, in Australia. Stress knows no boundaries. And certainly this is a mental health emergency in the wake of COVID, not just in the United States, but globally. 90% of doctors' visits are due to stress. There is a suicide epidemic going on around us, not only among veterans, but among college athletes, among youth and young adults. And so, in addition to the excellent professional counselors and psychotropic medication that's out there, there are also drugless, non-harmful coping mechanisms that have the ability to supplement and also allow people to become more self-aware that what they think about in their head can actually change their physiology.
Can we get a little futuristic for a moment before I bring some other listeners into this? I'm just thinking
Absolutely.
Well, there's a new novel by a Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist who I'm very fond of as both a writer and a person, Jennifer Egan, know personally. And in it, she talks about being able to access memories. I mean, this is obviously science fiction at this point, but it's also within the realm of plausibility. You can access your memories and you can reconstruct those memories. You can have a virtual reality in terms of what's in your memory bank. It's all in the realm of plausibility, isn't it? I'm not talking about something that's necessarily all that far off.
Absolutely. There is a phenomenal woman and technologist, Mary Lou Jesper. I'm butchering your last name, but she has a really neat project called Open Water, where they are working on digitizing memories. And so I dream of a day when I will be able to go back to my childhood home that was destroyed in a tornado many years ago, but have the ability to, go back to that. I can go back to that place in my mind right now. I can see that wallpaper, like it was right in front of me in my mind. But someday that, they will have the technology that allows you to do that inside media. And definitely check out the good work that Open Water is doing to try to make that possible. And ultimately, what we're doing with Healium is allowing people to create a stored memory. So, just as you were able to go back to that bridge in your mind without actually being into the bridge, you had been to that bridge before. So you felt like you could recall it in the mind. It's the same thing inside virtual reality. The brain is believing what it sees. And so we are using these experiences to create a stored memory inside the goggles. Sometimes people have never been to a beach. They've never, they don't have that stored memory. But inside the goggles, they say things like, not just I'm watching the beach. They say, I'm at the beach and, I'm watching the waves go in, and their language is very I language and very I'm here, as if, the brain is believing that they're actually there. Obviously, the person knows that they're not actually at the beach, but the body is responding as if it is. So, with Healium, we're able to create those stored memories that they can then go back to in a stressful situation. So for instance, if as you were approaching that bridge, maybe instead of seeing that reality of that bridge, you would be able to recall an experience that you had in the beach, either in reality or in virtual reality, and your body is responding in that same way, as if it was similar way, not same way, as if you were standing in front of a beach and watching the waves roll in.
I think we're going to be talking on Gray Matter with Michael Pollan. Psychedelics can also, of course, and mushrooms create that, where you not only think you're at the beach, but you maybe feel you are indeed there at the beach. Again,
absolutely. Cyberdelics. Yeah.
Cyberdelic. We're talking to, I like that, to Sarah Hill. And well, by the way, where did you get the title Chief Storyteller, and how does that actually define your role with Healium, or as long as we're talking about creating stories and the like?
Absolutely. So I've been a storyteller for decades. That was my roots as a journalist, every single day telling stories. And when I became an entrepreneur and now the CEO of my own company, that's still your primary role. You are still telling stories, the story of your product every single day. So those are the two hats that I wear at the company, CEO. And then I also create a lot of these immersive experiences inside the goggles. And writing a flat 2D story is very different than writing an immersive 360-degree story that's powered by your brain patterns and your heart rate. And also in the future, aroma. We're also scent enabling these experiences as well. So it is storytelling on steroids, if you will. And so, I've always had that dual hat of, yes, I run the company, and I also champion the content and the stories as well.
Well, the story of Gray Matter includes participation and immersion from our listeners. Let me go to some more of them. From Avondale, Arizona, we're joined by Ray Harwood, and he wants to know, have you studied the effects of a virtual walk in the park on someone who has never had a physical walk in the park? It seems the presentation needs to connect with prior experience in order to have the beneficial effect.
Yeah, Gray, that's a great comment and a great question. And I'm so glad that you tuned in to ask that. And the answer to your question is no, we don't have any data on placing someone in a virtual park with someone who've never experienced it. But that would be very fascinating piece of data to capture. And certainly in some of these areas, that might be a barrier to finding participants, maybe who've never experienced a beach or something like that. But we know they exist. And that would be really interesting to pair, how does reality impact brain patterns as opposed to virtual reality? And I'm sure that there are absolutely differences, and there's really no replacement for the real world. And I would know that they would impact, that would be a different impact, but I don't have any data to support that. That would just be a hypothesis.
Well, speaking about a hypothetical, you were talking before about how virtual reality can help you experience media without necessarily needing drugs to get rid of those Olympic-sized stresses that you go under. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about actually getting off drugs through virtual reality. I mean, there's been some exploration of that, hasn't there?
There has. Some entities are using these products to see if they can reduce the amount of anxiolytics. But I just want to caution your listeners that certainly our product and a lot of the other apps that you see on the virtual reality app stores are not meant to be any replacement for psychotropic medication or professional counseling. It's, think of it like a fitness tool. And so while you can talk about the science behind it, we also need to be very clear with people. Don't get off your medication and see if this works. Like, you need to talk to a professional, about what the best course is for you, because, medication isn't for everyone. And there are some individuals who really thrive with medication. So, it's not a one size fits all. And certainly our product isn't meant to replace, anxiolytics or any kind of psychotropic medication that you might be taking.
I have a psychiatrist friend who's just started an app to help people through hypnosis, which seems promising. There's lots of stuff out there to choose from. Here's Chris Clark, who wants to know about hospice care. He says hospice care provides a powerfully consoling form of palliative care during predicted final months of life. Can you speak about ways in which Healium participation provides palliative self-care well before a terminal diagnosis?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I appreciate you having that comment. So Healium, sometimes in the end stages of life, allows individuals to experience virtual nature. Certainly in their World War II, Vietnam, or Korean memorials, Viet Honor, everywhere, to places where they might not be able to physically travel. And so that has value for individuals to feel like they are there, even though they aren't able to be there. And beyond that, and beyond what we're doing, I'd also encourage you to check out some other companies. One of them is called Embodied Labs, that allows people to embody what it's like to have a vision impairment, or to have another kind of condition. And they're using it with frontline healthcare workers to allow them to develop a sense of empathy that then, translates into their practice. And this relates with hospice as well. You can actually step inside the story of someone at the end stage of life and experience, some of those different stages of dying, in order to allow those hospice workers to become more self-aware and have more empathy to what the patients they serve are experiencing. So certainly your comment and question is well taken. And yes, immersive media does have a valuable tool for people in end stage by allowing them to go to places where they can't physically travel.
And let me ask you, if I could, quickly about video games, because that keeps coming up in the literature that you read about virtual reality. Where does that fit in, particularly in terms of the effect on mind and heart and all the rest of what we're pursuing knowledge of here?
Yeah, the bulk of the experiences on virtual reality apps right now are games. You might think of Healium as a self-awareness game that you control with your brain patterns and heart rate. That's essentially how you play it. Your goal in this game is to try to lower your heart rate to make things happen inside the screen. You lower your heart rate and butterflies hatch. You lower your heart rate and fireflies come on the screen. It's ultimately based on game mechanics. But instead of using your thumb in order to control the screen, you're using your biometric data in order to make these experiences change. And the added benefit of that is it's helping you learn and become more self-aware that when you breathe differently, when you sit differently, when you put a smile on your face, you see impacts in brain patterns and heart rate.
It's also nice to see fireflies like you. I grew up in Ohio. I'm a Mid-American, and in California we don't see fireflies, so that's even
right.
Virtual fireflies are welcome. Do you also could you say something about the role now virtual reality is playing with? The Major Leagues has virtual reality. The National Football League has virtual reality. As far as games, even professional games have now accessed much more in this realm.
Right. Gaming is a big factor among elite athletes, certainly at the Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer, NFL teams. We recently developed a relationship with the NFL Players Association, where we're working to get Healium in the hands of additional elite athletes and raise broader awareness of this mental health emergency and the importance of mental fitness and drugless, non-harmful coping mechanisms. And so certainly inside a lot of these clubs, they have games that they play that can improve their reaction time improve things like P300 values in their brain. And all of that comes through gaming. And, the line between traditional games and digital therapeutics are absolutely coming together. And, there are, great applications and companies that are really the canaries in the mine right now, creating gaming that has impacts on ADHD and other medical conditions. And, we're rooting for those companies to continue to innovate in those areas, because ultimately, not everything has to come in the form of a pill. And certainly with having a game and having the ability to play it again has value for a lot of people.
Our guest is Sarah Hill, and our next listener joining us is Grant Whitehead from Adelaide, South Australia. Grant says, media diet is a helpful term. The rise of on-demand media is killing linear scheduled TV. Do you think there's a difference between passively watching whatever is broadcast versus intentionally choosing content?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I dream of a day where Netflix is able to use our technology to allow you to get a baseline on what your brain patterns or heart rate are doing, and then it's suggesting content to you that can make you more relaxed, or feeling more content or happier. That day obviously isn't here yet. It's coming in very, very baby steps, but I do think that line between being outside the story and passively consuming it and being inside the story and consuming it are blurring, and at the same time becoming more defined. And myself as a storyteller has very much crossed over into the realm of being inside the story, because I see how being inside the story can greater impact your brain patterns and heart rate. And so, that's the areas that I like to play in, because I can see its power on physiology. And my hope in the future is that media just won't be viewed as something that you consume for information. That media, flat media, 2D media, immersive media, XR media, whatever on that spectrum, will be used as a therapeutic tool that has the ability to change your brain patterns and your heart rate.
And more responses and questions. This is Juan Robles, who is with us from Mexico City. He says, how realistic does it have to be for the VR system to be beneficial in any kind of therapy?
So there are different flavors of virtual and augmented reality. So in virtual reality, you might have a computer-generated experience that's digitally rendered in a game engine like Unity game engine or Unreal game engine. Or you might have a 360-degree video that's shot with a real camera and placed inside the goggles. Or you can have a blend of the two. That's a computer-generated experience that's rendered out as a video and put inside the goggles. But I think it's important to mention that there are different flavors there, and we don't yet know. We're beginning to learn and understand as we look at brain maps of these individuals who are using virtual and augmented reality, how each one impacts the brain differently. Do they perceive a real 360-degree video experience as being more real than something that's consumer generated? I don't have the answer to that question, but I know that there are researchers out there who are studying that.
It's also very important, is it not, to track your data and to keep tracking it, monitoring it, and so forth?
Every piece of content that we create, we do a brain map on it to see, how is it impacting, brain patterns and heart rate. So that's been a learning experience for myself. In the old days, you would create a video story, you'd press play or publish it online, and you were done. But here inside, immersive media and what we're doing with Healium, we're creating the content, and then almost, we are doing trials clinical trials on it to see, okay, how does this piece of content impact a brain pattern or a heart rate?
People associate you with helium, like the kind that we breathe.
Absolutely. All the time we get people who say, so is this like a gas that you can smell? And, it's like, no, heal. The root word is heal, in that, we're trying to allow people to unlock the healing powers of media.
And here's Tlaloc Lopez Waterman, who's with us from Knoxville, Tennessee, and says meditation has been a source of healing and equipoise for eons. What's the biggest source of resistance to it in this age?
So the biggest, and it's a great question. I love Knoxville, Tennessee, by the way. Great memories of being in marching band, going through World's Fair in Knoxville, Tennessee. But anyway, the pushback is just from a lack of understanding. Anything new, sometimes, when you mention things like brainwaves, they think, are you putting something into my head? No, these are just wearable devices that are meant to be headphones for your forehead. They're just listening to brain patterns and heart rate. But it can appear very woo-woo to people, who aren't familiar with it. I understand that. And the biggest barrier is that meditation, the benefits of meditation are well known. And this is just the next iteration of meditation, that instead of passively listening or watching the experience, which has value, research shows that there's even more value when you are inside the experience and your body, is responding as if it's actually there. And so, again, would encourage you to try all different flavors. This is just a different form of one. And we really haven't had any pushback from the public about what we're doing. We're certainly not making medical claims, and, we're certainly not saying that, this can make you cure your depression or anything like that. It's just, a break in the day and some virtual peace, and one small thing that you can do for yourself to educate yourself, about how your mind and your body are absolutely connected.
What is the first thing you say, though? Let's do a little psychodrama here, if you don't mind. First thing you say to somebody, like I'll say to you, come on, this is all a bunch of woo-woo. How would you respond in terms of your own triage about what you need to put forward to sort of defend your territory?
Here, put this on your face.
Yeah, well done.
And instantly they understand. They're like, oh, I get it. When we, put people inside the goggles, or when we put them on a vibroacoustic chair, and they're able to feel the media in addition to seeing their brain patterns, or when we integrate aroma and you can absolutely see the brain changing in real time, there's no disputing the fact that, media has a negative and a positive impact on physiology.
Let me try to get to at least a couple more questions. David Anderson from Seattle wants to know, can you do remote neurofeedback? Usually the provider is in the same room with a computer using two screens. One they check and the responses by your brain, and the other you are viewing. COVID-19 doesn't allow the provider to be in the room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. And certainly there are phenomenal neurofeedback specialists out there. Just Google in your own community neurofeedback therapy, and they'll pop up on your screen. And there is great value in having that therapist right next to you, because they can gently guide you if you're getting off track or you're getting in your head. And matter of fact, Healium was co-developed by a neurofeedback specialist. And, at its core, we are combining neurofeedback, biofeedback with immersive media in virtual and augmented reality. But there's also the ability to do neurofeedback at home as a light version of, what you might find someplace else. Obviously, our tools are not diagnostic in any way. Inside a neurofeedback therapy center, they do have clinical tools that can be more diagnostic. In fact, there are entities out there that can do brain maps and, very quickly try to train up or down certain areas of the brain. And, this is a way that you can do neurofeedback at home. It's not diagnostic, but it's an extension of, what you might already see in a provider's office, just not diagnostic or treating anything, but, allowing you to become more self-aware of what you think about has an impact on your brain patterns and heart rate.
One more question from your Show Me Harry Truman State. How receptive have military and government agencies been to the idea of virtual treatments for PTSD and other stress-related disorders?
Very receptive. So PTS is a huge problem. We're losing 20 veterans a day to suicide. And so, not everyone is willing to ask for help. Not everyone is willing to raise their hand and go to a therapist or seek that out. And so, wouldn't it be great if there were ways that we could strengthen their resilience so that more people wouldn't have to, get in these situations? And that's just what we're trying to do with Healium, is build that resilience. Certainly when you're in a submarine or out on an aircraft carrier in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, sometimes you don't have access to nature, real nature, for months and months. And, a lot of these sailors and airmen are using audio CDs in order to, get them through stressful situations. Certainly audio has value for people, but there's an even greater value of immersing someone inside that nature and allowing them to see actually and feel like they're there. So, we certainly have seen receptiveness among all branches. They recognize that it's an issue, and they're trying to get these tools in the areas of acute situational and confined stress.
Sarah Hill, it's been a delight to talk to you, and thank you for not only all the information and enlightenment you provided us here in this virtual medium this morning, but also all the work that you've done. It's been fascinating.
Your listeners are phenomenal, and thank you for the opportunity to share such insightful questions and comments. And I am just really honored and grateful for the opportunity, and would encourage people to seek out any drugless, non-harmful coping mechanism right now, because this certainly is the stress Olympics, and not all of us have trained for it.
Sarah Hill again is CEO of Healium. That's Healium with an A. And thank you for being a part of this episode. For all of us here at Gray Matter with Michael Krasny, I'm Michael Krasny.
Bandwidth for Gray Matter is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.